As a matter of fact, after Stowell initially said that he had seen marijuana, he called Spencer back and said, "I am not comfortable with you using my name, and you have to corroborate me."
Despite Agent Stowell's reservations, the Sheriff's Department marshaled ground teams from the National Park Service and the Border Patrol. But even their ground surveillance turned up no marijuana. Nevertheless, law enforcement still commandeered a search warrant and ordered the troops to move in.
27 people were at the scene. There were at least 5 different agencies. You had the National Park Service there because we work with them in dealing with the marijuana eradication program. LAPD was there and DEA was there. Coupled with that is the National Guard that we worked with.
There was a crash and the house started shaking. And when I first realized it wasn't an earthquake, and I saw a man's face looking at me through the window. Here these men come running towards me, and I'm backing into my living room, screaming, "Don't shoot me, don't kill me." My husband heard me, and he came out into the living room screaming, "Francis, are you all right?" And he had his gun pointed up in the air, and he looked at me, and they yelled, "Put your gun down, put your gun down, put your gun down." And that was the last thing he said, and they just murdered him. This picture of these men was taken moments after they killed him by their own sheriff's department, and they're smiling like, I don't know what.
The troops searched the entire property, including a grove of trees where the 50 marijuana plants were allegedly spotted by aerial reconnaissance. And there was no marijuana.
But we found some lines suggesting the block and tackle method on some of the trees in that general vicinity.
There's no evidence that there were ropes and lines there.
I will never be able to be convinced they came here to serve a search warrant.
So why did 5 government agencies storm the house that morning? Was the raid on Donald Scott's property part of a government conspiracy to obtain his land for the Park Service under asset forfeiture laws? Does that sound too far-fetched to you? Not if you consider the findings of the DA's office.
Curiously, the district attorney's investigation yielded these documents. They were passed out during a briefing before the raid, a property appraisal of the 200-acre ranch and a map, including a notation by Agent Stowell that a neighboring 80-acre parcel had recently sold for $800,000. The district attorney doesn't understand why a search for drugs would include such information unless seizing Scott's land was law enforcement's motive.
I think this is simply a case of a good officer, very aggressive, who lost his moral compass, saw an opportunity to have his star rise rapidly in the department by seizing a significant asset.
In fact, current Park Service land acquisition policies across the United States are under scrutiny, considered heavy-handed, and in some cases illegal. As for Donald's murder, Frances insists that her husband was in the process of lowering his gun when he was shot.
It was just pointed up in the air. He didn't have a chance to obey their deadly command of put your gun down anyway. They just blew him away.
And Frances's nightmare just kept getting worse. Months after Donald's murder, the ranch house burned down. Frances says it may have been arson.
The house is burned down because the National Park refused to let the Ventura Fire Department put out the fire. They could have made a very simple fire break. They had all their equipment there just to make one little fire break, and the National Park stopped them. They said it is against our park policy to disturb the natural beauty of our park land. And now, guess what? Now the IRS wants to force a sale of this land to make us pay death taxes.
So let me get this right. One agency of the government comes in and kills your husband, and now that he's dead, another agency of the government comes in and wants the land.
Well, they haven't met me yet. They're not going to get this land. I couldn't believe this could happen in our country. I couldn't believe my father has fought in 2 wars for us to be safe in our homes. And for this to happen in America it's unbelievable.
That piece was absolutely frightening. And the fact that the 2 deputies who shot Donald Scott are still in service only goes to prove the point that the government is unaccountable. We are very fortunate to have with us on today's show 3 of America's foremost experts on asset forfeiture. Brenda Grantland is a graduate of George Washington University's Law School. She presently serves on the board of directors of FEAR, Forfeiture Endangers American Rights. And Jeffrey Steinborn is a graduate of Yale Law School and a prominent Seattle attorney who specializes in asset forfeitures. Judy Osborne is a hooker from Santa Monica Boulevard. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. A little.
You have your asset seized for that.
Have your asset seized for that too. There you go. Judy Osborne is the author of Spectre of Forfeiture. She defeated the government's attempted forfeiture of her home and now edits the FEAR Chronicles. Is what happened to Donald Scott a rare occurrence?
Many of the things that happen to Donald Scott happen every day. There are people that are getting killed because of the war on drugs and because police want to seize their house. There are many instances where the police lie to obtain a search warrant. And there are many times when the raids are made on places where no crime is being committed.
Mm-hmm. So how does civil forfeiture differ from criminal prosecution?
It's so easy to forfeit something civilly. All they have to do is say that we want it and come and get it. And at that point it becomes your burden, you the property owner's burden, to hire an attorney if you can find one who understands the law and to go there and prove that the government doesn't have a right to your property. So it's enormously different. Really all the government has to do is wish for it and it's theirs until you can go try to get it back, which is very difficult.
Wait, are you saying to me that under civil forfeiture the government doesn't have to prove anything?
No.
There's no due process of law?
No, that's correct. That's what I'm saying.
So
they can seize your property based on hearsay, and hearsay is really nothing more than a police officer standing in front of a judge and swearing to something for which he's not accountable. And that's enough to get the papers to seize your house. Then you have to go back to court and try to prove that your house or your property is not tainted by some unlawful conduct.
So how does do the police or the authorities decide whether a case is civil or criminal?
Well, I think nowadays they have to think more seriously about criminal because of some new developments in the law. But up until about a year ago, the courts had ruled that civil forfeiture of your property was not punishment, and therefore the government didn't have to follow the usual rules that they have to follow when they try to punish you for committing a crime.
So if the authorities have the option of saying this is criminal or civil, they can always say it's civil because it's easier for them to take it.
Absolutely easier. And that's what they do, and that's why for the last 10 years the government civil forfeiture program has really been running amok. What you have here is the government, well, the looters are in the wheelhouse, and they're using the government as a way to loot the country. And the result of it is that the police in situations like this really run around like children without adult supervision, taking what they want. In about 90% of the cases, there is no recourse. The property's gone, and whatever rights may have been violated along the way are simply ignored. Fortunately, assassinations are rare, but they're certainly not unheard of, and I'm sure we haven't seen the last of them.
So they can, if they want to, they can just come in and say that they can just plant evidence and
They can do that too, but they don't have to. They don't need evidence.
They don't need evidence.
They need a cop. We all know how honest cops are. They need a cop.